start recording. And make sure the stream comes up. It looks good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhi Tamastu Ma Vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Welcome back, and welcome to all of you watching this satsang online. We have, as always, a lot of nice questions. I'm missing a couple of, I think a couple of questions just came. Let me see if I can get them to show up here. By the way, if you want your questions to show up here on my iPad, you have to put Satsang question in the subject. If you put anything else, I get it, but it won't it won't show up here. So let's let me get back here, and let's see that. Where is that? Oh, there it is. Okay, Satsang questions. And as always, we'll take both from our online students and from our local students. We will go back and forth. First question from Om Prakash from Texas. During the practice of nididhyasana, if we start to contemplate that I am not the doer, akarta, does our past karma still affect us? Well, in nididhyasana, you appreciate the fact that you are consciousness. I am consciousness. Does consciousness have karma? Never did. Was consciousness ever affected by karma? Never. Never, ever. So nididhyasana is to contemplate the highest teachings of Advaita Vedanta. At that level, there's no such thing as karma. Atma is not affected by karma. Of course, when you're done meditating, you're stuck with this body and mind, and it's definitely subject to past karmas. But in nididhyasana, you want to reflect on the truth of Advaita Vedanta, which leads you to discover that your true nature as Satchidananda Atma has never been affected by consciousness. Next question, by karma, sorry. Next question from Judy, who lives in Canada, Saskatchewan. And Judy asks, I like this question. In using yoga as a foundation of a spiritual journey, is it necessary to practice or acquire Hinduism as a religion? Good question. Do you need to accept karma and reincarnation as being true, these doctrines? Very good question. And the answer to both is no. First of all, it's interesting to observe that even among Hindus, not everyone accepts reincarnation and karma. Many Advaita Vedantins in particular say, in fact, like me, say it's merely a belief system. You can accept it, you need not accept it. It has no direct bearing on your pursuit of liberation, your pursuit of moksha. I've said, of course, it's very helpful, in my opinion, but you need not accept it. So is it necessary to practice or acquire Hinduism? The teachings of Advaita Vedanta transcend Hinduism, and a good way of separating the two, Hindu religion from Advaita Vedanta, a little oversimplified but helpful. Religion is the domain of belief. Advaita Vedanta is not concerned with beliefs. It's concerned with the truth of who you are. So not belief. So in this way, it's different. In using yoga as a foundation, yoga is a very broad term here. If you're talking about the yoga of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, you definitely have to accept karma and reincarnation and other aspects of Hinduism to follow strictly Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. So I think she means yoga in a more general sense as spiritual practice founded on the teachings of the ancient rishis. I would prefer to use the word Vedanta. So using Vedanta as a foundation for a spiritual journey, is it necessary to practice Hinduism or accept karma? No, absolutely not. Next question from Maya, who lives? She lives. I don't know where, and that's okay. Please comment. Oh, this is interesting. I have to say that I'm enjoying this satsang so much because we get in a collection of questions which lead us to examine and re-examine all kinds of things. It's wonderful, and I like her question very much. Please comment on whether or not people are able to take on another person's good or bad karma. Is it possible? If so, how does it happen? There are some people who believe that your guru puts his hand on your head. You can see my answer already. Your guru puts his hand on your head and say, I take all of your bad karma. Tell me, does a human being, even an enlightened human being, have any control over the laws of karma? Laws of karma are like the laws of gravity. Natural laws. Can your guru make objects fly upwards? Your guru has no control over laws of gravity. Why should a guru have control over laws of karma, enlightened or not? So this is, by the way, an interesting connection that you probably didn't think about, and I doubt Maya thought about, is there's one famous example of this occurring in religious life. A guru who took on the sins, you know where this is going, a guru who took on the sins of all of his followers. The name of that guru was Jesus Christ. That's exactly what Christianity teaches. If you accept Jesus as your guru, so to speak, as your savior, you are freed from all your sins. Not bad. If it works for you, fine. I have no argument. If it works for you, that's fine. But according to the doctrine of karma, absolutely impossible. One more question here, then we'll take questions locally. Prashanto in Bangladesh, I have to pronounce it correctly. In the metaphor, the rope snake, we use that metaphor all the time in Advaita Vedanta. You see in a dark alley, you see a snake, it's actually a coil of rope. In that metaphor, it's clear that there never was a snake. So removing the snake from the rope is a non-starter. Nice that in Bangladesh they use this American language. I like that. Non-starter, I like that. Okay, also, according to Advaita Vedanta, everything is Brahman, which is pure and eternal, so there's no place for ignorance, and removing ignorance is irrelevant. If removing ignorance is irrelevant, then Advaita Vedanta is irrelevant, Swami Tadatmananda is irrelevant, what we're doing right now is irrelevant, so the yes, what Prashanto says is true in essence, but we're talking here about human experience. There never was a snake. Did you experience a snake? Did you experience fear because of the snake? So Vedanta is not getting rid of the snake. Vedanta is getting rid of your fear. There never was a snake. That's true. So Vedanta doesn't, I'm mixing my metaphors here. So there never was a limited individual subject to suffering. Never existed. So Vedanta doesn't have to address that. No, it gets a little more. In fact, we have several questions on ignorance, and we'll see this in more detail in the next question. So let me stay with snake and rope right now. So getting rid of the snake, you're correct. We don't have to get rid of the snake, but we do have to deal with the fear due to the misapprehension of the snake. And you can't get rid of, by the way, how to get rid of the fear. Suppose I say, you see the snake, and I tell you, there's nothing to be afraid of. You say, but I see a snake. Hey, okay, you see a snake, but I'm telling you, there's nothing to be afraid of. Will that work? That won't work. So you end up, you have to deal with the ignorance. You have to see the rope. When you see the rope, the misapprehension goes away. When the misapprehension goes away, the fear goes away. And so to an Advaita Vedanta, there is a failure to recognize your true nature as Satchidananda Atma. When that, and you then, therefore you misapprehend yourself as a limited being subject to all kinds of pain and suffering. When that misapprehension is removed, then suffering goes away. Okay. Do we have some questions here? Okay, we'll start here.
So, you know how in the previous class you talked about, like the magnet, in the sense that, I thought Atma, that it's supposed to be property-less, right? So even the fact that it illumines something is a property, and
okay.
I thought it doesn't do anything.
Okay. So the question is, we used in a prior class the metaphor of a magnet which causes things to move, but without doing anything. We used that as a metaphor for consciousness causing activities to occur in your mind without actually doing anything. Now you're saying that magnetism is a property of the magnet. Fine, it's a metaphor. And metaphors are never, ever perfect representations of what they represent. If a metaphor were perfect, it wouldn't be a metaphor, it would be the actual thing. So yes, the magnet has the property of magnetism, but consciousness has, you correctly said, the word you didn't use was nirguna. Nirguna, no qualities, no attributes. We can say no properties. And you did say something about illumining. Consciousness does not have the property of illumination. Illumination is not the property. Now, and for a little bit of a technical reason, we need to use just a little bit of logic right now. Is illumination a property of the sun? Now, a property or attribute, by definition, is something which is changeable. So, which means you can have, is the orange color a property of fruit? Well, for an orange it is, for a tangerine it is, but for many other fruits it's not. So you can say then that the color orange is a property since it's variable. So fruits may or may not have the property of being orange. Apply that now to the sun. Does the sun have the property of shining? Now, if shining is a property of the sun, it means it's a variable thing. There should be there should be a sun like ours that doesn't shine. There's no sun like ours that doesn't shine. So shining is not a property of the sun. It's the essential nature. The word we use is swarupa. So the swarupa of the sun is to shine. The swarupa of Atma is to illumine. It's not a property. So in this way we understand Atma having no properties. Again, this is in logic. We have to understand property as something that varies, something that can change. Okay? Other questions here? In back? You'll need the microphone. Oops, wrong one.
Swamiji, I always get confused between Sankhya and Dvaita. What exactly is the difference between the two?
Well, dvaita is a general philosophical term, meaning duality. Sankhya is one of the six traditional schools of thought. So they're not really parallel terms. So, but what we can say is that Sankhya, which is a philosophy associated with the practice of yoga, yoga in Patanjali's yoga, the very traditional system of yoga, and the connection between Dvaita and Sankhya is that Sankhya is a dualistic system. So Advaita Vedanta says there is one consciousness manifest in an infinite number of living beings. Sankhya says there are an infinite number of consciousnesses dwelling in an infinite number of conscious beings. So that's clearly a dualistic system. So this is where dualism fits into Sankhya. Sankhya is a system in which Atma is many, and Advaita Vedanta is a system in which Atma is one. So duality, Dvaita versus Advaita. Any follow-up there?
My question was the distinction between Dvaita and Sankhya, not Advaita and Sankhya.
Dvaita, duality, right.
Both are dual. Dvaita, not Advaita. Dvaita.
I said Dvaita means duality. In Sankhya, there are an infinite number of Atmas, consciousness.
Okay.
An infinite number of consciousnesses dwelling in an infinite number of conscious beings. So that is Dvaita, that is duality.
Okay.
I said as a counter example, Advaita Vedanta, which has consciousness being one consciousness manifest in an infinite number of conscious beings. That's a counter example. Okay? Any other questions here? Okay, let's take some more online. Then, next from, where did we leave off? Kartik. Kartik asks, how can one approach daily tasks effectively while following Vedanta's teachings to let go of desire and attachment? Excellent. It's crucial that following Vedanta is something that you don't only do during classes and satsangs like this one. Following Vedanta, or shall we say practicing Vedanta, if we want to use that terminology, practicing Vedanta is intended to be full-time. And full-time doesn't mean you're full-time going to be attending classes or satsangs like this one, but full-time means taking the teachings of Vedanta with you when you're engaged in ordinary worldly activities. And of course, the way you do that, the way you take Vedanta teachings with you into daily activities, that very practice has a specific name. It's actually a one-word name, in spite of the fact that in English we break it up into two names. The word karma yoga in Sanskrit is one word. It's one word. Karma yoga is the answer to Kartik's question. Karma yoga is a set of teachings which transform ordinary daily activities into spiritual practice. It's a huge topic, and the best way to understand it, instead of spending a lot of time on that right now, I mentioned before a particular video that I think is extremely helpful. A video I published maybe a couple of years ago called Secret of Karma Yoga. So find my video on Secret of Karma Yoga, and I think you'll find a very clear explanation of how to practice Karma Yoga, specifically how to convert your ordinary day-to-day activities into sadhana, into spiritual practice. Next question from Savitri. Bangalore. Okay, Savitri asks, this is about ignorance. Is the understanding that ignorance is the karana, sharira, vritti, language problem, and self-knowledge only removes or deactivates this vritti? Okay, we have a little problem. So karana, sharira is a technical name for ignorance, and it's kind of used out of context here. Let's set karana, sharira, and just focus on ignorance. And let me then rephrase her question. Does self-knowledge merely remove ignorance? Remove or deactivate? And I'm just looking at the rest of this. Okay. Tell me, there's something a little off here to say that spiritual teachings only remove ignorance. Suppose you're ignorant of Chinese language. Can we remove ignorance of Chinese language in any way other than learning Chinese? So the removal of ignorance is completely dependent on the acquisition of knowledge. These are not two different things, they're two sides of a coin, as people like to say, which is correct. So you only remove ignorance of Chinese by learning Chinese language. You can only remove the so-called veil of ignorance that covers your true nature, Satchidananda Atma. You can only remove that ignorance. She uses the term deactivate, which is an odd term. There's no Sanskrit equivalent for that. It's not a very Vedantic idea. We don't deactivate ignorance. We destroy ignorance. And that ignorance is destroyed only through knowledge. And in this case, the veil of ignorance that covers Satchidananda Atma, your true nature, that ignorance is removed, it is destroyed through recognition of your true nature as Satchidananda. And when I say recognition, I don't mean knowledge about. This is very common. Somebody says, Atma is Satchidananda. Okay, I know what Atma is. Correct. You have that information. Atma, Vedanta says Atma is Satchidananda Atma. You know that, but that's information. That's not Atma Vidya. Or maybe I should say Atma Bodha, which has the same meaning. Atma Bodha is knowledge, is the immediate recognition that I am that unborn, uncreated, unchanging consciousness that remains utterly unaffected by whatever I experience. That immediate recognition is what we mean by self-knowledge. That particular knowledge removes the so-called veil of ignorance. So ignorance is removed by knowledge. Next question from Patrick. Patrick lives in Grand Junction, Colorado. I am currently I think many of you will relate to this. I am currently struggling with some difficult coworkers who behave in some rather negative and adharmic ways in the workplace. They often speak about others behind their backs in nasty ways and are at times hostile towards me, and others they behave like bullies. I think we've all been there. We've all experienced such difficult people. Patrick goes on to say, I find it difficult to remain neutral towards their behavior and not let it affect me. That's a challenge, absolutely a challenge. I find myself leaving work feeling emotionally drained and exhausted. Again, I think we can all relate to that. I don't wish to judge them harshly, but I seem to do just that as a means of coping with the painful feelings that are stirred up within me throughout the workday. Patrick expresses himself very nicely. Well done. I know that they too have an inner divinity, just like me, and I would really like to be able to keep this fact at the forefront of my mind when I am near them. Yet, I seem to be unable to do so in the heat of the moment. So Patrick has understood this problem extremely well. And so he summarizes it as 2 questions. What are some of the spiritual approaches to this issue that can help me develop equanimity in a challenging workplace situation? And second, what has been your process? Oh, I didn't see that before. What has been your process in learning how to calmly navigate through situations with hostile or angry individuals? I reviewed these questions in advance, but I missed that one out. In fact, that would be a good place to answer Patrick's question, because allow me to give an answer in the form of a story, an anecdote. After I finished my Vedantic studies at my guru's ashram in Pennsylvania, I think that was 1987 to 1990. Then in 1990, a little after some break, I'd gone to India and did some other things. And then my guru asked me to be the manager of the ashram at that time. So I moved back to the ashram, and I was not yet a sannyasi, so I was wearing white, I think, in those days. And I took on the job of managing the ashram. In general, in retrospect, I think I did a very poor job. I was fairly immature compared to where I am today. I can only... Of course, we all do that. When you look upon yourself decades ago, if you're like me, you cringe. Oh, God. Did I really do that? Yeah, I really did. On the other hand, and definitely when I look back on my days as manager, I see that. At the same time, some Vedanta had gone in by then. Not enough, but some Vedanta had gone in. Enough so that at least, I won't say always, but from time to time, someone would come into my office angry. Because, I was, manager is responsible for everything, right? There's no toilet paper, and manager is responsible for everything. So anyway, there was something or another that made this, one of the volunteers in the ashram was very angry about something and started angrily, I don't know, the voice was raised, and I don't even remember what the issue was. That was 1990s, this is a long time ago, and my memory is not very good. Anyway, now suppose, I'm the manager of the ashram, it's my responsibility to take care of all this, and suppose I get indignant, why is this person yelling at me? That's not right. Here I am, dedicating myself, my entire life, I'm dedicating it to taking care of the ashram, and doing my best to make sure that everything runs smoothly, I might have gotten indignant. Why doesn't this person understand that I'm doing the best I can and I'm trying to take care of everything, and I certainly don't deserve to be yelled at? If I felt that way, I might have yelled back. And yeah, by the way, I've got a good voice. I could yell louder. And that's the way you handle it. So I could have yelled louder and then sent the person away. Now tell me, would that have solved the problem? In fact, it would have made a small problem much, much worse. So, and this is, Patrick puts it nicely, it's what you do in the heat of the moment. And that was a hot moment. You know, to have someone shouting at you it's a difficult moment. Fortunately, one of Puja Swami Dayananda's favorite teachings is to distinguish between the role and the individual. In fact, I'm going to do the typical scriptural thing and have a story within a story. So I'm giving you my story, and now I'm going to give you Swamiji's story. Then I'll come back to my story. And the story he tells is in a theater with actors, and they're performing on stage. And one actor has the role of a beggar. And in that role, this fellow is supposed to be on the ground, maybe in the gutter, begging, and another actor is supposed to come along and kick this fellow and then go on his way. And my guru used this example to say, what will be the actor's response when he's kicked? Now, it's an actor. So generally, if someone kicks you, you won't take it very kindly, generally. But in this particular situation, the person was playing the role of a beggar, and when he was kicked, he started crying. Good actors can do that, right? I don't know how, but they do that. They can summon tears. And as this actor is laying there, having been kicked, making tears come, the actor is thinking to himself, I'm performing really well today. My guru liked to tell that story to show how significant it is to distinguish what is role and what is you. You are the one who plays many roles. So, that's his. Now let's go back to my story. So, when the person came into my office and started shouting, it was very clear to me that they were angry at the manager, not me. Meaning, I didn't take it personally. That's it. I mean, in simple language, the language that many people use, they say, don't take it personally, but how? And this is the how part about don't take it personally. And what I understood was that this person was really upset over something, and it's only natural for the person then to blame the manager. As I said, the manager is responsible for everything, including the toilet paper. So it's natural that this person should vent their anger at the manager. Who else? Will you get angry at an empty toilet paper dispenser? That doesn't make any sense. So you get angry at the one who's responsible. I don't think it had anything to do with toilet paper, but I don't remember what the situation was. it was so clear to me. So my guru used this story many times, and somehow that sunk in enough so that when this person was shouting at me, it was clear that they were angry, not at me, they were angry at the manager. Now, that changed. Look at how the actor playing the role of the beggar, when they were kicked, they handled that so nicely, effortlessly. They didn't. Can you imagine if the actor laying on the floor gets up, "Why did you kick me?" It would ruin the play. That would never happen because the actor knows it's only a role. So for me, at least in some situations, I was able to discern this is only a role. The person is not angry at me; they're angry at the manager, and you can see what happens if they're not angry at me. Why should I get angry? Why should I respond? If somebody is angry at your dog, you don't get angry. I mean, I don't know. I suppose you might, but maybe that's not such a good example. And drop the example. So it was clear that this person was angry at the manager, not angry at me. Now, when somebody expresses anger at you, how do we respond? Basically, fight or flight, right? You're being attacked, and our response, verbally attacked. And our response to any attack is fight or flight. Well, flight is not really an option, so the general response would be to shout back. But I didn't feel attacked. I didn't feel threatened. Manager was threatened. I was okay. And that allowed for a completely different response. And the response was, as manager, I'm responsible to solve problems. Right now, the problem is this person is really upset. That's the problem. So my job then was to help the person calm down. And how do you help the person calm down? You listen patiently to the complaint. Usually managers, they hear the first two words of the complaint, and then they shut you down, and then they tell you why you're wrong and why everything is actually the way it should be. But there was no need to respond in that way. So I would listen, and in fact, more important, tell me, let's just suppose it was toilet paper. Which is more important for the manager, to solve the toilet paper problem or to solve this anger and upset? I would suggest that it's more important to address this person's feelings. The toilet paper is relatively less important, and I learned to do that. So this is we got now two stories going, and they both illustrate something which I think Patrick can put into, and everyone can put into place, and that is to distinguish between you and the role you're playing. In most situations, we are put into a role. And certainly at work. In fact, this is perhaps where this strategy is most applicable. I would say less applicable at home and completely inapplicable in some situations. For example, right now I'm not playing a role. That's, even though it's a very common kind of thing, and some teachers do play a role, doesn't work at all. Anyway, the point I'm saying is that this solution cannot be generalized for all situations, but it definitely works at work in your place of employment. And the way Patrick and any of you can apply this is, at work, by the way, it's true, you play a role at work, right? You behave in a certain way. Some of you have to dress in a certain way when you go to work. You know, I remember in one job I had to wear a shirt and tie and all of that stuff. Didn't suit me very well, but that's the uniform that was required. So you have to look a certain way, you have to behave a certain way, you have to talk a certain way. Isn't it playing a role? It is, absolutely. And that's not to be critical of it, it's what's required. They're paying you big bucks to do that, you better do it well. So you go to work, you play a role. So when a co-worker treats you badly, suppose you learn to do what I learned to do. You step out of the role. And I like that kind of language. You can imagine, I don't think any of us have the experience of like Hollywood and Bollywood. Actors step into their roles. They don't just turn it on. They practice. Professional actors, in fact, for some big movies, actors may spend a year preparing for a role. They do this. That's why they're paid millions of dollars. They're not paid millions of dollars just to show up on the set. So, actors prepare for the role, and the reason I'm saying that, I want to go with that language. Actors step into the role. And my point is, if the role is something you step into, you can step out of it. Even going to work, you step into the role. How? Well, you get dressed at home. While you're driving to work, you're rehearsing in your mind some of the things that you have to deal with at work. You're stepping into the role. Not in such a dramatic way as an actor would. But the point is, if you step into the role, you can indeed step out of the role. If you learn to step out of the, and it's a skill. Initially, you can't just, it doesn't work the first time. Guarantee. The first time somebody, after you're hearing this now, I guarantee you the next time someone shouts at you, this won't work. But after, about 5 minutes after you've been shouted at, you remember this discussion. And you say, do you know what? I should have stepped out of the role. And then the next time it happens, it still won't work. Because immediately after you're shouted at, after you've already reacted and all of that, then 5 minutes earlier than the last time, you get it. Oh, I should have stepped out of the role. After doing this several times, you'll finally get to the point where as soon as a person starts shouting at you, you remember, oh, I should step out of the role. It is an intentional, deliberate kind of detachment, but it's a healthy kind of detachment. Disidentifying yourself with that role, gaining enough mental space, so to speak, so you're not totally identified and totally subject to emotional reactions. You step out of the role. This technique needs to be practiced. It doesn't just, you can't just turn it on, but you can practice it and you can get really, really good at it. And just to finish this, imagine the person who is shouting. How would they respond if instead of shouting, I respond with compassion? Oh, you seem really upset about this. Tell me what happened. If someone is shouting at you and your response is, oh, you seem really upset, what happened? And if you express it with that kind of tone of voice, that is so disarming to the person. It's really hard to continue shouting at someone when they're responding to you in this way. It works. Of course, there are always some people who are ridiculous, but what can you do? You can but you can still step out of the role, which will be helpful. Okay, next question. How are we doing with time? Good. This is a question from Bennett, but it says here, on behalf of my cousin Praful from Pune. So, Praful, I hope you're watching from Pune. Question is, I've recently noticed that a lot of intellectual people here in India have been trying to prove that there is science in the Vedas and other scriptures. You know, they try to prove things like the Vedas are 20,000 years old. They try to prove that in Vedic times they really had chariots that flew through the sky. They really had arrows that detonated like atomic bombs because they had all this science in ancient times. There are some people who are really committed to this kind of, to me, it's I think the technical term for this is revisionism, revisionist history. To look at history and to revise it according to your particular worldview. And the worldview of these people, I think it's associated with this Hindutva movement, where they want to establish that Hinduism is the best religion, it's better than all other religions, and proof that Hinduism is the best religion, the proof is the fact that it's 20,000 years old, and they had enough science to create chariots that flew and arrows that blew up like atomic bombs. This is proof that Hinduism is the best religion in the world. And I'm sorry if my words kind of rub you the wrong way, as it were, but this is how it looks to me. It's revisionism, and it's unhelpful. Anyway, just to finish up Praful's question here. It doesn't seem logical and practical to me, so nor to anyone who is well grounded in science and reason will reject a lot of this revisionist dogma. It's a little bit like that. Sometimes it becomes a point among atheists to make fun of them. Okay. Could you please provide your view on this? I've already given part of it, but I'd like to add something which I think is very important. These people who embrace, and by the way, I'm not being critical of Hindutva, but I am critical of a certain kind of Hindutva, and the kind of Hindutva which results in this revisionism. Those who are focused on this revisionist history, kind of like going back and changing things to make things look better than they actually are, I don't question their sincerity. They genuinely want to support Hinduism. You can't argue with that. They generally want Hinduism to be respected. But in my view, that revisionism is having the opposite effect. Instead of causing Hinduism to be more highly respected, it's causing Hinduism to be less respected by people who know about science and history, because they're making ridiculous claims. When a Hindu makes ridiculous claims about his or her religion, how does that look to others? It looks bad. It looks bad to me, and I'm sure it looks bad to many others. So again, this isn't a criticism of Hindutva, but this revisionism, this tendency to go back into all the ancient scriptures and stories and put a spin on it to make it sound more than it truly was. And these claims that are not based on proper scholarship. Last point I'll make here is that there's a lot of crazy, what shall we call it? Fake scholarship. Like we call it fake news. There's fake scholarship out there. When a scholar says, I can prove that these arrows blew up like atomic bombs, the arrows we find in the Mahabharata is described, and the scholar says, I can prove it. That's fake scholarship. That is revisionist history. Anyway, enough said. Time for a couple more questions. Next question from Om Prakash, who lives in Texas. By practicing nididhyasana, this is interesting. Just remember, nididhyasana is a process of removing habitual identification with your body and mind after you become enlightened. So let me say that again, because otherwise we won't understand Om Prakash's question here. Enlightenment is the discovery of your true nature as Satchidananda Atma, but in that discovery, your brain doesn't automatically get rewired. Ignorance is removed. That so-called veil of ignorance has been removed. You really get it. I am not this body and mind. I indeed am that unchanging, boundaryless, limitless consciousness, which is utterly unaffected by all worldly problems. This immediate, direct recognition of your true nature is enlightenment. But because our minds are so habitual, and because our minds are embedded in the brain, which is a physical thing, physical things don't generally change instantly, nor does your mind change instantly like that. And this is a problem, and that is, after enlightenment, there is a habitual identification with your body and mind that lingers in spite of your discovery of your true nature. And all of this is necessary to understand nididhyasana, which is practice to remove that habitual identification. So, with this definition of nididhyasana, by practicing nididhyasana, we are programming our neurons. That's actually correct, right? By the way, where are memories stored? Physically, memories are stored in the concentration of certain neurotransmitters at the neurons in your brain. We know this. There's a ton of science to establish this. Memories are physiologically stored in your brain. So it's obvious then that this habitual identification with your body and mind has a neurological basis. Undeniable. Of course, everything you experience, look at this statement, everything you experience, happiness, sadness, has a neurological basis. That's just what it is. That's a fact, because the brain and mind are so intertwined. Everything we call experience indeed has a basis in the activities in the neurons of your brain. So there's a neurological basis for all experiences, and here we're talking about a neurological basis for the habitual identification with your body and mind. So, nididhyasana, we are programming our neurons, but he says, by practicing nididhyasana, are we programming our neurons to change our beliefs? Interesting. He uses the word belief, and that's significant. In positive thinking, by the way, positive thinking is something that's been very popular, especially in Western culture, for almost 100 years. I think there was that some famous book in around 1920s, Think and Be Rich or something like that. Anyway, there were, in the early part of the 20th century, there were a number of books that became very popular that were based on this, this positive thinking. And then the New Age movement took that up, and now it became manifestation. Through your thoughts, you can manifest your own reality. But not just any thought, thoughts that you think again and again and again and again. So here we go. So we are programming our neurons to change our beliefs. Can you change your neurons to can you program your neurons to change your beliefs? According to neuroscience, yes, undeniable. So suppose your positive thinking is, I am rich, I am rich, I am rich, I am rich, I am rich. If you do that enough, you can change the programming. So now you feel rich until you get your credit bill, your credit card bill, and see how much you owe. Now you have what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, because you feel rich, but the Bank of America says you're not rich. You owe us $12,000. You won't feel rich. And now you've got this problem of cognitive dissonance. You feel rich, but the bank says you're not rich. This is an abuse of this, some people call it neural programming. It's not helpful, to kind of convince yourself of something that's not really true is a form of brainwashing. And that's where he goes with this. Are we making our mind believe in a completely new system? Isn't that called brainwashing? Absolutely. That is brainwashing. That's not Vedanta, and it's certainly not nididhyasana. Remember I said nididhyasana follows enlightenment. When you get enlightened, you don't believe that you are Satchidananda. You've already discovered the truth of that. So nididhyasana is not inculcating a belief. Nididhyasana is inculcating knowledge. So utterly different. In fact, if anything, it's the opposite of brainwashing. I don't know what word to... there should be an opposite word for brainwashing, and I don't think we can make one up. Anyway, so if there is a kind of conditioning of the mind, there should be a deconditioning of the mind. Your mind is highly conditioned. Here's the idea of nididhyasana. Your mind is highly conditioned by decades and decades of living under the sway of ignorance, fully identified with your body and mind, and living under that ignorance for decades means you suffer the consequences. It's become deeply embedded in your mind and programmed into your neurons. That's exactly how it works. We call that mental conditioning. Fine. After you get enlightened, then let's do some deconditioning. Let's fix up the mind a little bit to make the mind fall in line with what we already know to be true. So it's not brainwashing, it's kind of the opposite of brainwashing. But most significantly, this whole thing is not a matter of belief. It's a matter of your own self-discovery, your own immediate recognition of who you are. That's what nididhyasana addresses. Okay, one or two more and then we'll finish. This is from Sheila, who lives in San Jose. Sheila says, there was a prior question about people who suffer in a natural suffered due to a natural disaster, Srila thought that it was because of their individual karma. And in a prior satsang, I made the point that there are so many factors in addition to an individual. You can't say that the fact that this individual was killed in a natural disaster, you can't say that it's due to their individual karma. There are so many other factors involved. And she says that changes everything. But if we suffer because she calls it universal karma, and I would say, instead of universal karma, I would say karma plus the laws of nature. So we suffer due to karma, meaning not just my karma, your karma, the karma of everyone involved, and also non-sentient beings. The earth is not a sentient being, so the earth creates natural disasters, and the earth itself is not a being that has karma. So karma is not everything. Laws of nature also are there. But then if we have to suffer because of all these factors, then we have no control or influence over what happens. Then why would we work hard at doing good and doing our best if we have no control? We have no control over nature. That's not a true statement, right? We have some control over nature. It's cold outside, so what do? We put ourselves in a box and we heat up the box. That's kind of a control over nature, and in so many ways. But notice it's quite limited. We have limited control over nature. How much control do you have over other people? Admit it. Zero. If you think you can control your spouse, you are deluded. Completely. And if you think you can control your adult children, you're even more deluded. Okay, enough said. We can't control. One thing we can control, at least to some degree, is our own behavior. And even that's subject to, in the heat of the moment, as the other questioner said, there are some times when we're not so good at that, but oftentimes we can control our behavior, which means when you are in a challenging situation, you can't control the laws of nature. You can't control the behavior of the other people involved in that situation, but you can control how you respond to that situation. That's also karma. Karma means what you choose to do now. Karma includes what you choose to do now with your free will. And how you respond to a situation can transform it completely. Look at the example I gave of being manager. If I choose to respond by stepping out of the role, it changes the outcome of the situation 180 degrees completely. So how you respond, deliberately respond to the situation, can have such a tremendous effect. Again, you have no control over the situation. If there's a natural disaster, you have no control over the other people involved, but thank goodness. There is some control here over how we respond, and through that, through choosing the best response possible, we can handle those situations so much more gracefully. And this would be a good place to conclude for today. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritangamaya. Om Shanti 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 Om. See you next time.